The instructions that we give people, reminding them that they have autonomy, that they have control over the choices that they make, can be a helpful strategy.
So, what are some of the things that impact our sense of control?
Yeah, so if I start off with an example from the laboratory and some of the research that we've done, and then I'll give some more practical examples that we use with clients across lots of different settings, whether they're organizational, sport, or whatever it might be. So I'll talk about the laboratory one just because it's simple. And I'll give an illustration that perhaps might be helpful. So we had two groups of participants, and they were about to do a climbing task, and they were novice climbers, so climbing up a 10-meter climbing wall was stressful for them. And we gave them a set of instructions about the climbing task, and we just manipulated three sentences in those instructions. So one group were reminded, simply being reminded, that they had control over which holes they would choose, whereas the other group were told that it was just luck that they would choose the right holes, was one of the variations that we had. Now, we did other things as well associated with that. So we built up their confidence with a sentence. We talked about, try your best to get as high up the wall versus try your best not to fall off the wall. That was the threat one. But the people who were emphasized control had a challenge response compared to those people who had a threat response. So actually, the instructions that we give people, reminding them that they have autonomy, that they have control over the choices that they make, can be a helpful strategy. In terms of some of the applied work that we do when we work with different groups or different organizations, a colleague of mine, Dr. Martin Turner, has developed a control map that's actually been quite helpful. And on this control map, we will have people to think about what's important to them. And that could be health, it could be performance. And they place this on the center of a large A3 piece of paper. And then what we do is we ask them to think about the factors that have an impact on health or have an impact on functioning, have an impact on performance. And they place those factors on this piece of paper. And then they will place those factors that they have control over closer to the health or performance issue in the middle, whatever it is that they're focused on. And for those factors that are outside of their control, we then get them to reflect on those and to think about perhaps how they can bring them into their sphere of control. Are there some things that you can do that can have an influence on this particular factor to bring it in a bit closer into the factor that's important? I'll give you an example, Owen, if I may, which is that sleep is often an interesting one, where some people will say that's something I have control over, and it becomes very close to the important factor in the middle. Some people say I have literally no control over how much sleep I have, and they place it far away. So we can have a good discussion then about how they might be able to have an influence over sleep and maybe bring that a bit closer in. But certainly this map where you start to think about some of the factors that have an impact on your health, well-being, or performance, and map that out and start to think about how you can bring some of those factors that are important to you closer to the middle by exerting greater control over them is a useful exercise. It's gone down well across different settings, from sport to healthcare through to education. I'd just like to say one thing about control as well, just because, like lots of psychological factors, there's a bit of a Goldilocks effect that goes on, in terms of too little, too much, and the right spot in the middle. And in terms of stress, the one thing I would say about control is that, in general, people who have perceptions of control over their skills or aspects of the situation will typically have a more adaptive stress response. So, if you remember, feelings of uncertainty, lack of control, these all contribute to a less adaptive stress response. However, for individuals who have an external locus of control, in particular high stress situations, that might be quite helpful, particularly where there's lots of uncertainty. I'll give you an example. So if, for example, some of the listeners might be religious, that they might believe that actually, it'll be God's will in terms of what will happen, then in a highly uncertain situation, that can be quite an adaptive or helpful stress response because you're succeeding control to a higher authority. And there's data that shows that individuals who have sort of, an external locus of control in highly uncertain situations, that can actually lead to a more adaptive stress response. So, like lots of things, there's nuance in terms of the data, and there might be some circumstances where actually having an external locus of control in something like God or a religion might be helpful. But in general, the data would show that individuals with perceptions of control or high perceptions of control would typically have a more adaptive stress response.